Chaplains are blessed to receive many invitations, some of which are a surprise. In August of 2008, the phone rang, and a dear friend who I'd mostly known for his work on 18th century constitutional law said, "Janet, my father has a memorial award based at Touro Synagogue, and I'm calling to tell you that the award this year is made to the Interfaith House at Brown University." I was stunned. Interfaith House is a beloved project of the Office of the Chaplains in Religious Life. We are unduly proud of the students who live there and their very careful efforts to live together across the lines of faith and identity in cooperative ways. But the idea that their work and its significance had become significant in the life of the oldest synagogue in the United States, and particularly a synagogue that had made a point of acknowledging interfaith work with an award that was named after a distinguished judge in the state, was astonishing to me. I then learned something that made me smile. In fact, it was their expectation that I would come in August for the annual reading of what they called the Washington Letter. This letter has been quoted and quoted and quoted across the centuries. It actually includes a beautiful quotation that asks whether or not to bigotry there will be any sanction, or to persecution any assistance. Washington says neither will be so in the new nation that he would lead as president. This letter was written to the members of Touro Synagogue, and each year is read by them in August on the date they received it. They received it in 1790. Washington was making his very first visit to the state of Rhode Island, and in fact, he was not being welcomed with a hero's welcome. Rhode Island had only, by 4 votes, decided to, in fact, join the United States of America. But what was most remarkable, of course, to the chaplain at Brown was that this was also the first time that Brown University had awarded an honorary degree out of sequence. What do I mean? We'd awarded it in August, as opposed to May at commencement. For those of you not accustomed to university rules, this probably doesn't seem so strange, but honestly, it nearly takes an act of Congress. My need to be in Newport to receive an award that in many respects I felt I had not earned was also out of season. I wanted to summon the 30 residents of the house from all the places where they were working and traveling over the summer to say, you must come with me. You must tell everyone in the tiny synagogue at Touro what it is you've been working on and why it's so dear to your heart. But of course, they were too far afield. My teachers of history back to my undergraduate days at Wellesley were singing in my ears. Learn more about this occasion. Tie this award to what the current students are doing and take it back into the history of the United States in a way that will make the contemporary address at 80 through Touro somehow a place of even greater distinction. So I began to read. I learned some magnificent things, and they relate directly to the work that our students continue to do at Interfaith House and for which they were being honored by the members at Touro Synagogue. Let me tell you a little story of the 18th century in Newport, Rhode Island. The family named Touro were in fact the benefactors whose money and mercantile interests made possible the founding of Touro Synagogue. But many of the members of that synagogue had come from Curacao, to which they had fled because of the persecution in the Netherlands of Jews. They had never lived in a place where it was legal to be Jewish. Finding Rhode Island a colony, they were able both to set up their business interests and also to live with freedom and even to build the most beautiful synagogue still awarded architectural awards for its gorgeous design, and to establish in this new and free world a place where religious liberty was not just an idea, but a reality. It was critical then that Interfaith House and this award that we were receiving in 2008 somehow speak in eloquent ways to the foundations of the very place that was making it. I learned something magnificent. Down the street from Touro Synagogue was Second Congregational Church, even in 1790. At the helm, Ezra Stiles, soon to be Yale's 5th president. Visiting at Touro Synagogue in those days, a rabbi who was only there for 6 months, His name was Chaim Isaac Karagal. On Purim, Ezra Stiles, unfamiliar with what Purim even was, went to the synagogue to see if in fact he couldn't understand this ceremony. He loved it. He was very impressed by the rabbi and his fluency, his ability to interpret the ceremony and to welcome many who were not Jewish. Ezra quickly, in 6 months of the rabbi's residence in Newport, began to be his student. He studied Hebrew with him so regularly that by the time the rabbi was departing for his new post in Barbados, Ezra Stiles was fluent. When he went subsequently to become Yale's 5th president, he insisted that Yale students be fluent in Hebrew, and until 1792, valedictory addresses at Yale were given in Hebrew. After that, like chapel services, they became voluntary. But what's remarkable is that the Yale insignia, the motto of the school itself, often quoted to us in Latin, is in fact originally in Hebrew. It stands for light and truth, the two things worn in the breastplates of the high priest to indicate the presence of Almighty God, and so sacred that the rabbis rarely translate them at all. It's critical to our understanding of interfaith work in the 21st century that we understand that we stand on the shoulders of the founding mothers and fathers and religious leaders of the founding of this nation. Ours is not a new idea. It's an idea whose time is still coming. It's an idea that in every generation will take new builders. So let me take you back to that letter for which Washington's become famous, because understanding it just a bit more deeply will in fact tell you why the initiatives of our students on campus, in their interfaith residences, in their service projects, in the efforts of congregations across the nation are critical. You see, Washington's letter was not a proactive letter, it was a reactive one. Moses Sessions, a name lost mostly to history, but beloved at Touro Synagogue, Moses Sessions wrote to Washington. He had heard that there was a vote in the Rhode Island legislature to include Rhode Island in the new United States of America, to ratify the Constitution. Sessions' family, like many others at Touro Synagogue, had fled landscape after landscape, and in fact worried that this new establishment of a nation might mean the need to flee again. He wrote to Washington to ask if it was safe to stay. It's a remarkable letter because, in fact, the very quote for which Washington has been famous, "To bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance," are actually the words of Sessions to Washington, and Washington merely quotes them back. I leave you with this insight. It's interesting to wonder how the future of our nation will move forward because of the proposals of our citizens. From where I sit as chaplain and faculty member on a university campus, the citizens of the United States and those who come to study in the United States as our beloved guests are the ones I'm watching most carefully. We're developing curriculum in response to the questions they ask. We're following their lead in many respects and proposing in response the best of our scholarship in an effort to forge new visions, in an effort to take an address like 83 Touro and link it to Park 51. It's critical to understand what might need to be written to the leaders of our states, to the heads of our religious communities. Who is the Moses Sessions of this time? Who will write on behalf of Park 51? And I expect they already have, asking, will this be a place where I may pray as a Muslim? Will this be a place that Muslim leaders and Muslim residents of the city of New York will be able to come together to honor the very best purposes of the United States of America? Not far from Ellis Island, Park 51 is a new beacon, a new test, a new measure. Touro Synagogue sits just up the street from what in Ezra Stiles' time was known as Jew Street, a place where the first Hebrew cemetery was allowed to be fashioned. The Hebrew letters that sit in the middle of Yale's crest, in fact, testified to a time when it was not easy to even insist that students learn Hebrew, let alone that Jews and Christians live together. Ours is not an easy time either, and the challenges that we will find in letters written to the President of the United States to ask if it will be safe to pray will come from particular addresses across this country. They will be signed by students of many, many faiths and ethnicities. But the words of the prophet Habakkuk, the gentleman with such a strange name that translated means asparagus, come to mind. For still the vision awaits its time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. The honor that the Interfaith House at Brown received was honor indeed, but more so for the shoulders upon which we stand, and more so the honor to persevere in the interfaith understandings that will be nurtured in our universities, blessed in our congregations, and lived address by address across this nation.